Adrian, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're up to?
All right, cool. So I came to this country when I was 2 years old. I was born in Ecuador, and I came over here when I was two. I'm gonna be vulnerable right now because I think that I haven't been, to a lot of people, but I feel comfortable doing it here. I grew up being an illegal in this state. I mean, not in this state, but like in this country, and overcoming kind of like the mental load that has on somebody, that's like a difficult thing to do. And I think that recently I've started more like understanding the impacts that has had on me and my persona growing up. But you know, on the 16th, I have my interview for citizenship. So it's been a long journey, man, and I'm happy that's coming up soon.
That's so awesome that you're finishing that part of
Oh,
your journey.
you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. To be open with you, yeah, I'm in the same boat. I came here when I was 6 years old and I was in the exact same circumstances. And I think I'm a little bit behind you in regards to the journey because I think just now I'm starting to like think about how that affected me. But it's great. I think already you're inspiring me because I see like, hey, Adrian's over here and he made it and he's at the end of it. So that's great. Yeah. Why don't you tell me about how you got involved in STEM? Like what obviously you were in a difficult position. And I know that as an undocumented immigrant, you might have that mentality of like, can I do anything in regards to studying past high school? And then obviously you went above and beyond. You didn't just choose any, career. You chose a difficult one, engineering, right? So, what was that journey like for you?
um, Accidental, actually. So I originally wanted to be a business major because my end goal is starting a company. That's what I want to do. Not because anybody else is like, I know a lot of influencers now are like, you got to start your own company, you got to be your own boss. But that's something that I've really held within me even since like middle school. But I realized that having a degree in business is not necessarily something it's not the most efficient pathway towards that. So I chose something else. I chose computer science. And computer science allows you to have the tools to implement solutions to problems. And fundamentally, that's what companies are built around are problems, because problems are where market fit come in, and that's when you can provide a solution and sell a solution. So that's why I chose that. It was accidental because I swear I thought I put down I wanted to be a business major on on my application. So I don't know where comps I got in, but I got into the program straight through. I didn't have to, it's an LEP and a limited enrollment program at the University of Maryland, but they just put me straight through. And so I'm grateful for that. And I didn't have to reapply or anything. So I got straight into it and I started learning. And that's been something that honestly, I'm so glad that it happened because I love programming. Honestly, I started back when I was in sixth grade, I think. I got into it like that was an accident too. My teacher came up to me and said, "Hey, we have this competition going on. Do you want to get involved?" I'm like, All right, let's do it." And so she was like, "Okay, learn Python. You have 2 months."
Wow.
I was like, "Okay, cool." So I did. I learned Python 2.0, or I guess 2 point something. I don't know, but it wasn't a Python 3.0, which is what's being used now, or
Right.
3.5. But so I did, and like we placed. It was like the competition criteria was you had to make some sort of app or something, and it was you either got it working completely, it was semi-functional, or it just, like, didn't, like, do anything, right? So we got to, like, the 2nd tier, and I was at the forefront of my team because my team didn't end up learning Python, which is great. But, I was able to do that and kinda help myself out in that way because now programming is natural to me. I kinda have more of an intuition for it than I think most people do coming into it. So I think that was definitely strategically very good for me, even if I didn't know it at the time.
Right. So I do want to get your point of view from your unique perspective. What challenges did you face while going through that STEM pathway, having been in that specific situation of being undocumented? Like, how did that affect your journey?
Ooh, okay. So I'm still trying to figure that out personally, but thinking out loud, it's something that kind of weighs. It's never at the forefront of your mind. Like you never think about it intentionally. It's always something that's kind of just lingering in the background, affecting how you view the world, not necessarily like the decisions that you make. But honestly, your perspective and how you see the world is how you navigate it. And so if you have this warped lens, which I think I still very much do, and I have to get over it, it affects you in subtle ways, but subtle ways over a long, long time. And that's those subtle corrections that, or not corrections, but I guess subtle differences then from what somebody who didn't have that experience growing up, it leans on you in like a certain ways. It makes you think, oh, okay, yeah, sure, that person's doing this, but like, can I, like, is that something that's really for me, or is it something that's for them? Can I really do this? Do I have the ability to do this? One of the things that when you grow up being undocumented, you're told by your parents all the time, like, hey, don't get into trouble. Whatever you do, do not get into trouble because trouble means trouble for everybody, not just you.
Yeah.
So you're very risk averse. And I think naturally I'm more of a risk taker for sure. So that helped me kind of push past that in certain regards. But honestly, again, it's the subtle things, that get to you over time. So even if like I'm more of a risk taker, I feel like there's a lot more that I could be doing, in terms of taking risks and trying to put myself out there and feeling like all the stuff that's going on in the world isn't just for everybody else. Like I can have those things too. I would say it's definitely it affects you in nuanced ways. Like the best way I could describe it, growing up undocumented, it's like being stuck under a boulder, like a big heavy rock. Can't cry out for help. Like you can't yell out, say, "Hey, I need help," because that's drawing attention to yourself. And like the last thing you want to do is draw attention to yourself. Not only is that scary, that could be detrimental to your family. And so you got to think about things that happen and that kind of stuff. And you have these like little experiences here and there that just kind of like shape your worldview too. Little offhand comments, here and there. And it's just like you can't really point to any specific instance, but it's more just like these things that affect your psyche over time. I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like they slowly like build
Hmm.
upon one another to create like this big, like you said, boulder that kind of sits on you
Hmm.
and it weighs on you. I agree 100%. And I'm gonna try not to turn this episode of the podcast into a therapy session. But I really appreciate what you said about being risk averse because yes, like I think for a lot of people, safety and security isn't something that you think about until you're much older, where your parents are like, "Hey, make sure you don't talk to strangers" or things like that. But the fact that when you're undocumented and you're in the United States, like your very existence here is an unsafe one. And you have this constant fear of being quote unquote discovered, I
Hmm.
think. And it becomes a sense of like you be I personally began to like question like what my role in the world was because it's like if my very presence is an illegal one, right? Like just by existing here, I'm breaking the law. It creates all sorts of like complex like thoughts and you're like and when you start thinking these things, at least for me, I was like, I'm 6 years old and I'm like
Yeah.
trying to deal with this existential crisis of what my existence in this place means. Yeah, it can really affect all your decisions, that come after. Even things that other people might say, like, is this even considered a risk? Like, as the undocumented person, you might think like, yeah, everything's a risk. And so it's like you have, at least I personally had that desire to like play it safe whenever possible, but that's not what gets you success, right?
Hmm.
You have to take those risks. You have to be out there, putting yourself out there.
Can I ask you something, Matt?
Sure.
So you came over here when you were 6. You're aware of when that was happening, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I remember the day that I was told, like, and that was an accident too, man. It was So okay, this is my brain blocking it off because before I had this conversation with my parents, kind of revisiting it, I thought it happened in first grade when they told me
Yeah.
that I was not wanted here in that way.
Right.
But they're telling me it happened in fourth grade. So like there's definitely some mental trickery going on here, kind of putting things in a vault and
Sure.
sealing it off for sure. But yeah, that moment for sure. I think I need to see a therapist to figure out
Yeah.
what exactly that moment was for me and what it means for the rest of my life. But yeah, that's an experience not too many people go through. Thank goodness. So
Yeah.
I don't want that for anybody. But it's kind of like being shut down in a certain way. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Genuinely, I don't know.
I know. And
Mhm.
we're gonna turn this into a very special episode type podcast. I don't know if you remember in the 80s and 90s, they had like those very special episodes where they would talk about like,
Uh-huh.
if you see something, say something. So yeah, it's definitely, but it's something that's important because I know that there are some of our listeners of the podcast that might have gone through the same thing. And I know for the longest time, I personally lied to myself and said, "I'm fine. It didn't affect me. It's not a big deal." Like,
Mhm.
but it's not until later, like you mentioned, that you start realizing all the subtle ways that it
Mhm.
affected you that build up to this huge, weight and it changes who you are really going through those things. And you're right. Like, I remember when I came over here, like that memory is imprinted into my brain forever. Like I could not forget that moment, because it's like as a kid, that what's going on is just so beyond you, and that a lot of times, like, you don't have any self-agency in that moment,
Mhm.
it's like you're not in control of what's happening, you're not in control of what's gonna happen, you just know that something could go wrong at any moment, and it's
Mhm.
not because of anything that you're in control of, so I know that for me, it's something that I still subconsciously, randomly, that moment will just pop into my head, and I'm just like, "Okay, I'm thinking about this."
Oh yeah.
So yeah. So what was the moment for you that you started being a little bit more willing to take these opportunities that were being presented to you?
So I actually can point to like a very specific moment. I was talking with a friend and he was older than me. I think this happened the summer after ninth grade. So he was older than me and he was telling me about what I later found out was called the Matthew effect, which is when somebody realizes their own potential and it goes down through avenues. And essentially what happens is there's an inflection point where among the average growth of IQ along a population as you get older, your IQ tends to increase, especially like in youth. And there's an inflection point where like certain people, their IQ kind of skyrockets. And he was telling me about how this happened to him, and I was like, "Oh, okay, that's awesome. Let me do that. Let me get smarter if I can. That's cool." So I just decided, like from that moment on, all right, I'm gonna do what it takes, And so I was supposed to be in this honors level history going in, but as soon as the class started, first day, I just kept thinking about that conversation. I was like, okay, I need to change this. So I moved myself up into the AP level class for US history, or it wasn't US history, it was AP government actually. And so I did that and I did well. I got a 5 on the AP test. It was the first AP class I ever took. And it was because I moved myself up into that role, defying the recommendation of my teacher last year and the year before that, who said, like, oh, you should be in honors level. Like, I don't think that the GT level or like the AP level is good for you. I was like, no, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. That's the only way that I can really move forward is moving myself up,
Yeah.
you know. That was definitely the moment, and that came with its own ledgers. But definitely I can point to that moment specifically as being very influential to the person that I am.
That's amazing. I think it's providence that we're here together, we met, we're talking about this
Mm,
because it's great, and I do think it's interesting how I was talking about, like, the lack of self-agency in, like, these large events in our life, and it
mhm,
feels like the moment that things change for you is that moment that you decided, "I'm gonna take self-control of my future." Even if somebody else might tell me, like, "No, you're not ready for this," you're deciding, like, "No, I wanna be better, I wanna do more." And it seems like that was the moment that you were able to kind of get that ball rolling.
mhm.
So that's great. And so what happened after that? You started doing that. Did you continue pushing yourself?
Yeah, I continued pushing myself. because I did that, I didn't even I've never thought about this before. That's like the first time I'm considering this, but thinking about it now, because I did that, I was able to make new connections, and my teacher recommended me for this club. So I did that. I did all these other clubs too because they were kind of relational. You know, there's mock trial, Mali United Nations, Econ Challenge, all these different things. And so I put myself out there. I was like, okay, all right, cool. Let's do this. Let's try to do this. And I did. I did well on them. So I kind of just continued doing that. And now going into University of Maryland, shout out Terps. You know, like at especially that first semester, there's a lot of drive, you know, like, okay, how do I take advantage of college? Because I really am about thinking outside the box. For even high school, like, okay, I would do the clubs, but I wanted to differentiate myself in other ways. And one of my friends who I met in one of my classes, he had this nonprofit. So I was like, cool, how do I get involved in that? And so eventually I was a board member for that nonprofit during my high school years. And that was good because it's just, you know, my mentality is open as many doors as possible and keep opening doors. Like don't shut yourself into a like a line or a path that you have to follow. And I figured that out pretty early on with there's this school called the Applications and Research Laboratories, ARL. And it's kind of like a magnet school in that you go in and you have different classes that are specialized. Like I took a 2-year course in aerospace engineering at that school. I figured out that I didn't like aerospace engineering, you know, and so I thought I was going to be an aerospace engineer. That was my plan, you know,
Yeah.
ever since middle school. I saw that dollar sign on the on the engineering, and I was like, okay, cool, I'm going to do that. That's what I want to do. But I don't think life works like that. You know, I don't think life is able to be mapped out that well, especially that young. I mean, I was what, 12, 13. I mean, I know more now, but I'm not, I'm nowhere near close to like knowing everything or even knowing like a little bit.
Sure.
I'm 20 years old, man. Like there's a lot left to go, you know? But yeah, so going back to college, I started reaching out like, okay, my dean published like the dean's list, like the top 20 or whatever students that I guess he liked. I have no idea what the list.
What the metrics are for
Yeah,
that.
no idea. But there is a list of people on there, and I was like, I picked somebody that was that I liked. You know, I was like, okay, let me reach out to this person. So I found him on LinkedIn. They had this little link to like be able to schedule a meeting with him. I was like, cool, let's do that. Shout out David Boutin. And he told me, hey, you should get involved with SHIP. I was like, what is that? He's like, it's a society for Hispanic professional engineers, and it's cool. You should get involved. I was like, okay, cool. Let me do that. So I took his advice, went out to a couple meetings, made some friends, got on the e-board, and you know, the rest is history for that, for sure.
That's awesome. You mentioned something that I want to go back to. You talked about you liked opening as many doors as possible. And I think that at that point, you had realized that being risk averse is not beneficial to your professional growth or even your personal growth. And I feel like that risk aversion sometimes comes with the challenge of thinking that if you open a door, you have to go through it. But then you mentioned that aerospace engineering, you tried it, you didn't like it, you didn't have to keep going down that path, right? And
Mhm.
so I think that's important for a lot of people to, I think, understand is that just because you're opening all these doors doesn't mean you have to go through all of them. You're just kind
Mhm.
of trying out and learning about new things and
Yeah.
seeing like which one of these do I want to go through. But if you never open them, then you never know that those are available to you. So I think that's a very great illustration. And I think that hopefully that'll help people who are indecisive in regards to like, do I want to try this? Do I not want to try it? Try it. Try it because then you'll know if you like it or not. And then you can decide for sure. Rather than later, years later, you know, having that regret of like, should I have done that? I never tried it. I don't know if I would have liked it. I would have been good at it. So yeah. And so you got them out with ship. And I feel like I know the answer to this because you're describing what kind of person you are, and you're definitely like, I'm taking control of this. I'm a go-getter. I'm gonna go above and beyond. But I'm gonna ask you anyways, what led you to decide to be more than just a regular ship member and move into like a leadership position?
So this one, I can't take credit for this one. This one's credit goes to Daniel Lopez, so shout out him. But he was a president, man. And one day after an event, I stayed behind to help clean up because my intention always is to like meet interesting people, and it tends to be that interesting people congregate in leadership position. 'Cause that's what's most interesting to me. Like I was telling you before this podcast started, but I had my own podcast interviewing high performing students in high school, and so it's always like an interest of mine. Is like okay, figuring out what the best are doing, and how do I either emulate that or just learn or just explore. Honestly, just curiosity.
Yeah.
So I stayed behind and we started talking and we got dinner, and then from there, like a couple months down the line, he sent me a link like, hey, these are the appointed positions. You can just apply for them. I was like, cool, let me do that. And then lo and behold, I got one as the event coordinator. So I was like, okay, awesome. Let's get this going. So then I was introduced to like the e-board and we had a good year doing that for sure.
And what role are you in now?
The vice president of corporate affairs.
Perfect. And what does the vice president of corporate affairs do?
So it's pretty self-explanatory. I talk to the our corporate sponsors, try to get more corporate sponsors, organize the corporate events, anything having to do with the corporate world is what I'm in charge of. And so far so good. So far so good.
Do you have any advice for people who are struggling with that part of being a leader of a ship chapter? I know some people that are struggling with knowing how to interact with them and what to ask of them as sponsors.
So yeah, one thing I would give advice is when you reach out to a corporate sponsor, my advice actually let me back up. So my advice would change depending on whether you're an established chapter or if you're just starting out with a new chapter. If you're just starting out as a new chapter, I would definitely say your school probably has a person who is already doing corporate relations with different partners for the school themselves. So I would say reach out to that person, get in touch with them. For us, that person is Tamika. So
Shout out to Mika.
shout out Tamika, yeah, for sure. And make sure that you get in contact with that person, get the ball rolling on that conversation, saying like, hey, I know our school has these relations with these companies. Like, would they be interested in doing an event? Getting to see if you can have a contact through that, and then getting them to do the event. Most of the time, you can ask for them to sponsor food at a minimum, right? And so I would definitely do that, regardless of you if you're just starting out as a chapter or if you're already an established chapter. As an established chapter, usually they'll have sponsors reaching out to you, and so then it's just a matter of communicating your corporate sponsorship package, making sure that everything is good in there. I would say for sure in the package, describe what you're using the money for, because a lot of the times it's the communication can be, oh, we need X amount or whatever. You have sponsorship tiers but make sure you're communicating, make sure that they understand, okay, this money is being used towards sponsoring students to go to national convention. This money is being used to do X, do Y, do Z, whatever. But make sure that they know. And then getting that to them is a matter of the corporate sponsorship package. And that's more for an established chapter. But then again, like it's not really that different for an established or a newer chapter, I would say, just besides the fact that like a newer chapter isn't going to have that relationship built up with those corporate sponsors yet. So in the beginning, you might have to do more of a type of approach where you say, hey, come out, do an event, maybe do a mock interview, maybe a resume critique, maybe how to network. I don't know, something along those lines. And then say, hey, if you like our chapter and you like what you see and you enjoy the people that you've met, maybe consider sponsoring us in the future. And then you hand them the corporate sponsorship package. And that's kind of the deal, I would say, for newer chapters and also for newer companies that you haven't built up that relationship with.
That was the most comprehensive response I've gotten to that question. So thank you very much. That was
Sure.
great. And so normally I like to ask you to give some advice to future ship members, but because of the unique interview that we've had today, I'm going to ask you a different question.
Sure.
What advice would you give to somebody who might be in a similar situation to the both of us? who isn't documented and is just starting out their career and might be considering STEM?
I would say that for people who are in a position, the fact that you are undocumented, it's very easy to kind of write it off as like, oh, this is yeah, it's just an event that happened in my life. It's just a circumstance, and not think about it too much in the sense that like, and not realize or avoid the fact that it is affecting you in certain ways. I would say it's hard, but you need to understand the effect it's having on you, the effect that it has had on you, because that's the only way to really affect your future is to notice the ways that it has affected you in the past. I don't really think there is any other way. I I definitely need therapy, but
I'm right there with you, man.
yeah, that's gonna have to wait until I got the money for that. But yeah, I would say it's a circumstance. Fortunately for me, is a temporary circumstance, and that now I'm able to have a pathway towards citizenship, and that's coming up very soon for me, and I'm very happy about. It. And I think that's the reason why I'm so comfortable talking about.
Sure.
It. Because if I didn't have that, then I think I would still, as much as you don't want to admit it, like it's scary. Like you want to say like, oh, I'm not scared of anything. It's like ghosts now. But no, it's scary, just having that thought back of your head. And it's especially like, at least for me growing up, we had family in the States, so we moved around from like place to place. I think I've lived in like a dozen places over the course of my life. And staying with family, or staying with like close family friends, it's not the same as just living in your own house. You have your parents, like you can't be a burden in that house. You can't really, like, you don't really have access to a childhood in the traditional sense. You know, you can't like, don't touch this, don't do that, don't run around, don't make noise. Like you can't do anything,
Yeah.
and so that weighs on you because those are the developing years of your life. That's going to be affecting you in very real ways later on in life. And there are ways to move past that, but it takes work. And the first step is to realize the effect that it is having on you, because it's continual, it happened at a young age, but that doesn't mean it's over.
Yeah.
It keeps going, and it weighs on you, you know, the figuring it out. I don't really know if there's a way to escape the boulder. You can definitely crack away at it little by little, take one pebble out at a time. But as far as advice goes, I don't know, man. I don't know if I'm in the good position to give advice to anybody, much less on this. But
I want to tell you that I think you are. And I want to tell you why. And it's because you didn't let that stop you from getting to where you are now. And I think a lot of people might have. And so you obviously did something right. And I think we did cover it in the interview that you had that moment where you decided like I'm gonna go above and beyond despite the circumstances. So don't sell yourself short. You're even a lot of people who weren't in that situation aren't where you are now. There's a lot of people that decide I'm gonna just play it safe, stay home, work in the same neighborhood that I worked at the local, whatever store. And they might be happy with that. But then there's other people like yourself that decide I'm gonna do more. I want to be better. And you did. And so and I think the advice that you gave was good advice, to identify that it does do damage being in that situation. And that's the first step towards, you know, making things better.
thanks, man. You don't know, like, it's hard to accept that.
It
Thanks, man. Like
is.
it's really hard to accept
It
that. It's
is.
definitely something that I got to work through. It takes time. And definitely like even hearing that, like it's hard to, believe it sometimes, for sure. And I can see where you're coming from. I just like it's hard. Like I make the distinction between logically knowing something
I
and
know.
like emotionally understanding it. It's two very different. very different. And yeah, logically, no, you can know like, oh, okay. You look at a resume, you look at a piece of paper detailing all your accomplishments. Cool. Do I feel like I necessarily did all those things? Does it feel like it doesn't feel like right? You know what I mean?
I
That's
do. I do know what you mean. I
yeah.
know because I think the number one question is always, am I good enough? And
Mhm.
yeah, it's hard.
Let
It's
me ask you
hard.
something, man. Are you a perfectionist? Wow, I can't say words right now.
Perfectionist?
Perfectionist, yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes to certain things, I am. And I think that I've had to try to let that go because in certain aspects, because I feel like that was one of the things that was, I sometimes turn that inward.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And so because I'm thinking inwards, I have to be, it might even be perfect, right? That you think like I have to be as good as everybody else, or I'm clearly not even if I tried. All these like thoughts come with it. And so one of the things I've tried to do is to not be as perfectionist, at least when it comes to my own personal self, while keeping a balance of maintaining growth. But yeah, I think it's the pressures that, like the whole thing, like you said, living with your, you know, relatives. I went through the exact same thing. And so a lot of times it's like when you get asked those things of like, don't touch anything, don't be too loud. Like it feels like you're just, your very existence is a burden, you know? And so then like, I feel like that turns into like your own mind constantly questioning everything that you do. Like, am I being a burden? Is this good enough? Is this, the things that you did, do they matter? You know? So, I know I got a little off track from being a perfectionist, but that's to say, yes, trying to tone it down.
Yeah, I feel that, man. I feel that feel one very specific thing you said, like, do the things that you do even matter? That's very real.
Yeah, and so
Very real.
the way that honestly that I try to get over that specific feeling is that the way I can see a direct effect of my actions is by helping other people, and the fact that you can be a positive effect in somebody else's life. I think there's no better way to prove that you're doing something good than by helping other people. And I feel like you're doing that through shit, right? Like you could just decide, "Oh, I'm going to be doing my own thing, my own personal thing. I don't have to volunteer. I don't have to put in the hours. I don't have to put in all this effort to do all these things that benefit other people." But you're out there doing it, you know, and you're positively affecting other people's lives. I've talked to so many people. I want to say this weekend, but this weekend isn't even over. But the last couple of days, and they all talk about how much help they received from either their current leadership or past leadership, you know. And I've also talked to some professional members. Like those are the ones that go even above and beyond because a lot of, you know, ship members decide, oh, I'm out of college, I'm done, great, like I got my job, you know, see ya. And it takes even more effort to be a professional member to come back and you have your full-time job, you have all these things going on, you then you end up having, if possible, like a partner and kids and all this stuff, and you have your whole life, and then you decide I'm gonna go back and try to help all the people the way I was helped. But that's to say that that's the way that I tried to overcome that feeling of like, is what I does what I do even matter? Because I feel like when you're able to be a positive change in someone's life, I can't logically say no. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? Like I have to admit to myself, like it does, because I'm seeing it through these people. And I think you mentioned that you have difficulty accepting that. I'm the same way. Like I'm really great at giving people like, you know, like compliments. When people give me compliments, I have the hardest time accepting them, right? It's like,
Oh, yeah.
you know, "Oh, you did great." "Oh, did maybe, whatever, it was whatever." You know? But the thing is that, like, when I'm trying and doing my best to be a positive impact in someone else's life and I see it, then I have to accept that they're doing better. You know what I mean? Because it's somebody else. And then it connects to me where it's like, I know that I had a part in that because they're telling me, you know, that it's kind of like a loop, you know what I mean? Where it's
Mhm.
kind of like I help them, they help me by being a positive display that I had that had a change in their life. You know?
Mm,
And I think that's what I'm seeing here. You know, that's what I'm seeing here at Nila. That all it's a loop of people helping people.
mhm.
You know, and you're a part of that.
Yeah. No, I'm glad to help in any way that I can. Yeah, definitely on the other side of that coin though, I feel like sometimes being that type of person, because like I'm the same way where it's like help other people out. Like I have a lot of trouble like asking for help.
Yeah.
And I think that also goes back to childhood, because like you're like, what are you gonna ask for? Like,
Right? I don't deserve help.
yeah, no, like no, it's so real too, man. And like I grew up in like not only with that, but we were like very poor growing up.
Yeah.
We were very poor growing up. And so like once in a blue moon, we would get like $10, go to Chuck E. Cheese. And I remember like my parents would tell me, as new immigrants, they didn't know that you could get water for free. And so it was like I drink water, they drink soda, and they would get like a fountain drink that they can refill.
Yeah.
And that's great for them, but I don't drink soda. So they would have to buy me a water bottle, and that's like a financial burden, buying a water bottle when you can just have like a soda fountain drink. And that's like it plays on you like, okay, cool. Like maybe don't ask for as many things,
Yeah.
even things that you need.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I definitely like still just see like affecting me. And like this one's hard. This one's very hard to kind of overcome. At least for me personally, is like asking for help
Yeah.
because all my life I've had to do it myself, you know.
Yeah.
Like and even in places where I needed it, like it's like in your formative years, it just happens to be that your circumstances didn't allow for, regular childhood. That's fine in the sense that you can work past that, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't affect you. And so I definitely understand that mentality of like being like a people pleaser.
Yeah.
I gotta help everybody out, but like at the same time, man, like I'm burning the wick at both ends.
Yeah.
It's just putting myself out there trying to help other people out, like stresses me out. But stress.
Yeah.
I'm not allowed to feel that.
I know, and I can understand that.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you what helped me. It might not help you, but maybe it will. Who knows?
Hey man, I'm happy to hear anything. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the way I see it, and this might be, I hope a therapist doesn't listen to this article, 'cause it might be just like us giving each other like the worst feedback ever.
Dude, I have no
We
idea.
should have a disclaimer about this not being medical
Mhm.
advice. But something that helped me is that I accepted that in order for me to help people,
Mhm.
I'm gonna need help from others.
Mhm.
And so when I ask for help and I see it as like I have the excuse of I'm gonna use this information I'm receiving to help other people, it's not for me. I'm not asking help. They're asking help for me. You know what I mean? It's like this, like I'm asking help for them. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like, so when I ask for help, it's like in order for me to continue helping other people, I need some assistance. Then it becomes unselfish. You know what I mean? Like it's not a selfish ask. Even though in the beginning it's not even a selfish ask to begin with, right? Like we all need
Mhm.
help. We should all just be able to ask for help. But obviously I'm not gonna, try to change that trade of thought because it comes with so much baggage.
Mhm.
But that's the way I see it. That in order for me to continue helping people, I need to ask for help. And it's all ultimately with the goal of helping other people. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But I will say this though, man, like I feel it's that mentality of like I don't want to burden people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's ingrained in there for sure. But no, thank you for that. I'll try to I'll take the time to reflect on that. Because it's never as simple as like just hearing advice. Like, okay,
Oh,
cool, let
perfect.
me
It's
do that.
solved. Yeah.
Yeah, great. No, it takes reflection, takes time. So there's a lot to think about for sure, and a lot of different things. Like I'm so grateful for Neela. This has exceeded my expectation for sure. The conference that we're at right now.
Definitely.
One of the exercises that they had us do was they put us in negotiations, and before that, they gave a presentation on like the secret sauce to leadership. And in the negotiations, like I definitely did not follow the secret sauce. I was like very much like I was kind of hardballing it. I was like, no, give it to me. It was like a dispute over who gets oranges. It was like, oh, give us the oranges. And, There's a trick to it though, because person A only needed the rinds and person B only needed the juice. You know, so if you read a little bit closer, you would be able to see that and like, oh, everybody can win.
Yeah.
But it took that activity for me to realize like, oh, okay, maybe I do need to like take a step back and understand what I'm doing in like certain situations, especially like in the heat of the moment, because I think that's like what counts in most parts. Most of the time, that's the important thing. And so, yeah, no, it's a lot of reflection, I would say for sure. And grateful for that. This podcast too. It's gave some good questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Helping me out too, man. Obviously, we both have things to work for.
Oh yeah.
But the other thing I was gonna mention, before we wrap up is
Mhm.
that the number one thing I think that you have going for you is that self-awareness of the fact that you still have things to learn. And that's the number of the like you said, the first step towards, getting better and not ever getting to the point where you think I'm beyond receiving advice, I'm beyond learning because that's the day that we stop growing. So just keeping in mind that we all have room for growth and things to learn, I think is what helps.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you for having me
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, thank you for being here and we definitely need a part 2, man.
Sure. I look forward to that.